G'day and welcome to Just One More Watch. It has been a long time since I've had an Aussie watch on the channel. And if my memory serves me correctly, the last time I reviewed an Aussie watch, things didn't go too well. Let's hope for better today from the John Robert Archetype. This one is launching on Kickstarter today, the 30th of January, for a period of 30 days. I'll leave a link in the description of the video, either to their website or the campaign, depending on what time they decide to launch it. Now, I featured this watch in my top 6 micro brands to look out for Q1 2021 video a couple of weeks ago, and I did so for a number of reasons. It's an Aussie watch as discussed, and it's a bit of a rare treat around these parts, and it has a linen dial. I have never reviewed a linen dial watch on the channel. When was the last time you heard of an affordable linen dial watch, especially from a brand new micro brand? I had a good chat with the owner, John Robert Barclay, back at the end of November last year, and he assured me he was doing everything to the best possible standards. My only concern with this one has been, and still is, the price. Those standards mean it's priced a little bit higher than a lot of the usual Kickstarter stuff. 2 different models, a quartz for just under $400 and an auto, admittedly a top grade fully decorated auto, for just under $800. I cannot think of any other watch that's available with a choice of 2 movements, price more than doubling between the two. Not even the new in-house Oris Aquis does that. Does it justify the price then? Let's flip the camera and have a look at it. My apologies, I'm sure you saw the pop-up, but I do like to verbalise it in the intro as well, and I forgot. This video is sponsored by John Robert Wristwatches. They will be sending me a quartz in the colourway of my choosing should the Kickstarter campaign be successful. I make no apologies, however, for the amount of macro footage that I'm going to include in today's review. Really, if you're in for this one, then you are in for it because of that linen dial. That's this watch's USP, or at least that's the Automatic's USP. I think the quartz is interesting in its own right. It's a high accuracy quartz. I'll talk about it a bit later on. But the dial is going to be the big draw either way, really. 3 different colours. There's a charcoal, a blue and a white. I've got the white and the charcoal. As you can see, the white isn't just white. I think there's a bit of silver. There's even a little bit of champagne if you catch it at the right angle today. It's a fairly dynamic looking dial. That would be my colour preference. I'm normally into black dials and dark dials, so the charcoal would have been what I normally went for, but the white dial really is stunning. I hope some of this macro footage and the wrist shots that I'm going to include do it justice. And these are like hen's teeth linen dials. They are so rare. I had a good look on Google. I could not find anybody selling a linen dial in a modern watch. Really, if you're looking to buy a linen dial, then you're looking at vintage. You're looking at picking up a 40, 50, 60, even 70-year-old Longines, Omega or Rolex with the price and the inherent risk that comes from buying a vintage watch. I'm not personally into vintage. I would much rather buy a new watch that looks old than an old watch that actually is old. And if you do back the campaign, this is what you'll receive. You'll receive this little leather pouch, a watch with a stainless steel bracelet, and 1 strap in the colour of your choosing. Now, it should be noted that it's not just the movement that differs between these 2 watches. The case is actually quite different as well. Quartz on the left here and auto on the right, and the case is about 1 millimetre slimmer on the quartz than the auto. They've also adjusted the end links of the bracelet to fit that different sized case. Also a few differences in the weight as well. I'll talk about that in a second. So that linen dial is pure vintage. We're obviously going back to the middle of the 20th century for the styling, and they have kept the sizing vintage as well. 38 millimeters in diameter, 12.5 mil thick for the auto, 11.5 mil thick for the quartz, 43 lug to lug, so very, very compact. People with smaller wrists, ladies, no problems at all, I think, with this one as well. 20 millimeter lug width, tapering down to 16 at the butterfly clasp. Now, I mentioned there's a difference in the weights because of the different movements. This one, the auto, sized up for me on the bracelet, i.e. the heaviest possible combination, is just about 120 grams. Take 20 grams roughly off for the quartz movement. If you want it super light, the quartz on the leather strap comes in at bang on 50 grams. Therefore, the auto on the leather strap is going to be about 20 grams heavier than that at 70. 316L stainless steel construction throughout, case, crown, full stainless steel bracelet here. Now those are push pins on the Jubilee links. It's a 5-link Jubilee bracelet, and it's a butterfly clasp with quick release. So you've got that little 2 button pushers on either side of the clasp. And check out the outrageous double domed sapphire crystal. Box domed, that is almost top hat. It is so high. I reckon there's a good 2 to 3 mil there. It is a lovely piece of glass though. Very, very nice indeed. Apparently there's only 3 layers of anti-reflective undercoating underneath that crystal, but I've had no problems getting a decent read of this one indoors or outdoors. You've got a bit of distortion just at the edges there, but it's a really, really nice piece of crystal. Very well shaped for the dial overall. And given that they're going for that dressy tool watch brief, 100 meters of water resistance with a screw down crown on both models. The bracelet's nice. I do enjoy a jingly jangly Jubilee myself from time to time. They are exceptionally comfortable, and nice touch there, adding that little JR, the John Robert crest, to the center of that butterfly clasp. Now, I know there are some of you who complain about wearing another man's name on your wrist, or at least that's what you tell me in the comments section, whilst wearing your Hugo Boss suits with Calvin Klein underwear. Don't worry, you're not wearing another man's name on your wrist. John Robert Barclay is the owner of the company, but one of his grandfathers was called John and the other was called Robert, so you're actually wearing 3 other men's names on your wrist. Mixture of brushed and polished surfaces, and the side view means you get another shot of that outrageous piece of sapphire crystal. You have got a vertical brush to the mid case, a longitudinal brush to the upper edges, and a high polished edge running length to length, lug to lug, all the way around the crown as well. Relatively compact crown with the little JR signature etched into it too. But back to the dial and back to some macro. I should probably point out that linen dials are not actually made of linen. They are just etched in such a fashion as to look like linen, to replicate the kind of random organic patterns that you get because linen is a natural material. Indexes are applied all the way around. They are high polished, tapered arrowhead indexes, very elegant, I think suiting that mid-century look overall nicely. The John Robert crest appears again under the index at 12, and the John Robert brand name and automatic are also etched into the dial. Dauphine handset beveled in the middle, high polished silver, and a needle second hand with John Robert JR signature on the counterbalance. That very much reminds me of the ball that I reviewed a couple of weeks ago. They have that big RR logo on the counterbalance of their second hands as well. There is a date complication on both of these watches at the 3 o'clock, framed in high polished silver to match the hands and the indexes. And because this is Swiss made, those 2 words are nestled neatly underneath the index at 6. The only difference on the dial between the automatic and the high accuracy quartz is the word printed above that index at 6 being either automatic or HAQ. So let's talk about the movements, and I think there's a couple of interesting choices that they've gone for here, not least of which is the quartz, and there it is. It's an 8 joule ETA 64111, accurate to plus or minus 10 seconds per year. If you are interested in one of these, depending on how this watch is going to fit into your collection, the quartz could be a fantastic choice. Not just because it is half the price of the auto, but because it's pretty much always going to be at the right time. Battery changes every 3 years for this one. And that is the auto. 26 joule hacking and hand winding 4 Hz high beat Sellita SW200 in fully decorated top grade format. And that is a piece of flat sapphire crystal with anti-reflective coating, so when the watch is not on your wrist, you can always ogle at the movement with no reflections. On wrist it wears very nicely indeed, super short lug to lug of 43 and a relatively compact 38mm diameter dimension. On the Jubilee it reminds me quite a lot of my Seiko Saab that I actually fitted a Jubilee to try and replicate that whole mid-century vintage date just look and feel. I think this watch captures it nicely. And that's the quartz on leather, the lightest combination at 50 grams. Nice high quality leather strap, it smells good, and you have a high polished logoed John Robert buckle and tang. Overhead shot with the charcoal dial, not a huge amount of contrast at some angles because it's high polished silver against that silver grey dial. I think if legibility is a concern, then the paler of the dials, the white one, is definitely the one to go for. Yeah, just a little bit more contrast between the hands, the indexes and the dial on this silvery white model. And outside, I was surprised when I read that there were only 3 layers of anti-reflective undercoating on the crystal. They do a pretty good job. They must be quite thick layers. And there it is on wrist again, this kind of side profile shot for you as well. Very, very nice and neat on wrist, this one. And a pocket shot, because it's a Jubilee bracelet on a butterfly clasp, you don't have any micro adjustments. You are limited to link by link adjustment therefore. I tend to wear that style of watch looser and lower as a consequence. Jubilees are very comfortable though, and at 120 grams, it's not a big heavy watch that's flopping around your wrist knuckle anyway. So a very pretty dial, very comfortable watch on wrist as well, and a couple of interesting and very distinct movement choices. But as always, I do have a couple of moans and niggles. Look at that little truncated index there at the 3 o'clock, making way for the date window. It's actually rectangular. It's not arrowhead. It's not tapered like the others. It just looks slightly out of place as a consequence. And the word automatic is a bit shouty there in large capitalized font, exactly the same size as the brand name is, a couple of centimeters above it. I've never quite understood why brands insist on printing the word automatic on the dial anyway. It's not just small companies like John Robert, big brands do it as well. Surely the person who bought the watch knows it's automatic. That's why they bought the watch in the first place. I just don't quite get it, I'm afraid. Now, dressy tool watch may have been the brief, but the lume on those hands is a bit underwhelming, and there is no lume on the indexes. I would say this was the bare minimum amount of lume required to qualify for the dressy tool watch category, therefore. And the butterfly clasp, whilst I do appreciate the double pushers, something I moaned about the lack of on the ball that I reviewed a couple of weeks ago. That one was quite brutal, you just had to yank it. There is a bit of play here around that crest, as you can see, and it's the same on both of the bracelets that I was supplied with. These are prototypes, I guess. Maybe that's something that they will rectify for the production units, but perhaps not. I think it is just inherent with the design. And the straps, nice quality. Branded with John Robert, and they're going to be quick release on the final units. Faux croc though, not really my cup of tea. And then there's the price. I'm not suggesting that these watches are overpriced, because I don't think that they are. I was wearing the pale dialed automatic on the Jubilee this morning at breakfast, and I passed it over to Mrs. Jomwa for her opinion, and she is a notoriously hard marker. She said, "Oh, it's nice, it looks like a Longines," which I took as a compliment. "How much is it?" $800 US, I said. "That's cheap," she said. "It looks more expensive than that." And I think it does. It's a beautiful dial, lovely patterning, great indexes. Jubilee always helps with that. And let's be honest, where else can you find a top grade Sellita 200 for less than $800 with Swiss made on the dial and a lovely piece of sapphire crystal? My issue is the price gulf, the huge disparity between the two different models. I've never seen it elsewhere. It's like going into a car dealership and there's two cars next to each other. The base model with a 1.6 litre 4-cylinder for $20,000, and next to it is the 3 litre turbocharged V6 for $40,000. Are you buying a $20,000 car, or are you buying a $40,000 car? Particularly as so many components are shared between the two. I can't help but think that they would have done better putting a more economically viable Swiss movement in the automatic, maybe going for the base model SW200 rather than the top grade and pitching it a little bit cheaper. It just goes to show though that when you buy a watch, how much of the money that you're spending is actually paying for the movement. But I wish them all the best for their campaign. It's great to see another Aussie brand on the scene, because there really aren't too many of them, and it's great to see a brand coming in with a clear idea of what it wants to do and not afraid to take risks. I hope those risks are rewarded. So there you have it, the John Robert Archetype. Certainly a more positive review overall than the last Aussie watch received a couple of years ago. That's for sure. I think John has clearly ticked the box at the very top of each of the options page throughout the process of designing the Archetype. That is a gorgeous piece of sapphire crystal, and the dial is just beautiful, particularly in this pale model. I reckon that's the one to go for if you want a bit of extra legibility. I'll be really interested to see how the campaign does overall, and really interested to see the sales split between the high accuracy quartz and the auto. I wonder if he might have sold more units had he gone for a standard rather than a top grade auto and priced it for a couple of $100 less. But let's be honest, what are your options if you want a Swiss made linen dial watch with that level of quality in it? $800 still is not a bad deal. Thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you in a future video.